to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
What's going on, guys and girls? Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are listening from. Today, I have a great conversation with Kate Mangino, who is a gender expert who works with international organizations to promote positive social change. And she has written and delivered curricula in over 20 countries about issues such as gender equality, women's empowerment, healthy masculinity, and much more. And she brings her lens of social change to her debut book, Equal Partners, which is out June 28th. And today, Kate and I talk about gender equality in relationships, whether that's during dating or in established partnerships. And then we dive into gender equality in general. And I really enjoyed today's conversation. I think you guys will too. If you have kids, we talk a lot about how to talk to our kids and raise our kids in a way that they are going to appreciate gender equality and maybe not fall into traditional gender norms and things like that. But if you're listening and you're annoyed about when you date and you go and expect either yourself or the person you're on a date with to pay and everything in between. We talk about that, what to do in those situations, and much more. It's a really important conversation today with Kate. Hope you guys enjoy it. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And if you enjoy this show, if you've listened to shows before, if this is the first show and you like it, we really appreciate those reviews in iTunes. It really helps us to continue to bring you these great episodes. I'm just right there along with you, getting this information, asking the questions, but by no means am I the expert here. I would be listening to this podcast to get the information myself if I saw it out there. So thank you guys. Enjoy today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship.
Do you guys want to create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days?
Yes. Sign me up.
Then you guys need to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. It is an online course, like I mentioned, that we created with over 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you guys the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients.
We talk about it on the show. Relationships take work. Sometimes they function pretty easily and you coast along, but we've found the reality is you have to do work sometimes and to make them better, to change them so that they're more satisfying for both partners.
And you've made it here. You've made it to listening to our show. So you guys probably already know that a little bit, but what you might not know are the specific tools and exercises that you need to create those lasting and positive improvements in your relationship. And like Chase said, change does not happen on its own. It takes hard work. And that's why we created the course.
Spark My Relationship is designed to infuse your life and relationship with fresh passion, skills, and wisdom. And it's a self-paced journey that's perfect for turning up the heat, having some fun together, and revolutionizing your intimacy and communication.
And just some tools and strategies that the course includes is to how to eliminate unhelpful old habits, develop mindful awareness to help improve your stress management, learn healthy and successful communication tools, create a deeper and more intimate bond, and strengthen your couple microculture, which you will find out what that is, in the future together. So for our listeners only, we're offering a special of $100 off the course. Visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock to unlock your discount. And there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there really is no reason to not give it a try. So go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock for $100 off.
Hi, Kate. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about gender equality in relationships. And when that comes to dating, even for people single, and if you're in a relationship currently, you've written a book about it. You spend a lot of time in this domain, and we haven't dedicated a whole episode to talking about it. So I'd love to start by having you tell our listeners why this is an area you like to focus on, and then we'll talk about some of the things we need to think about.
Fantastic. My career has been in international development. I was a Peace Corps volunteer out of undergrad and have been working with nonprofit organizations my whole career and working specifically in gender. So some development projects do infrastructure, building roads and that sort of thing. My piece of it has always been on social development, so working alongside health and education programs. And so I've always been obviously very interested in gender. And because of my work, I've had these fantastic opportunities to go to all different countries and talk to different people from different backgrounds. I haven't found a country that has nailed gender equality yet. Everyone is struggling. That struggle looks different from place to place. But I found that I was having these really sophisticated conversations in Zambia and in Indonesia and in Nigeria. And when I became a parent, I realized even more how antiquated the conversations were in my own personal life. And so I think that this book project stemmed from my desire to really acknowledge the fact that our country is also struggling with gender inequality and try to do something here with my own community. And I think that one of the things that we need to work on the most is equality in our personal lives. So yes, absolutely in a relationship between two people, but I think there's a lot of, there's a role for the community to play in sort of shifting expectations and norms around what it means to be a partner.
Thank you for that. So let's talk about how we can take this information that you've been gathering, these conversations, and apply them through the lens of relationships. Obviously, we're doing that individually as well. So how do you think about these issues when it comes to, we could start with dating and then talk about a long-term committed relationship and everything in between?
So first of all, in the book, and I'm going to use this in our conversation today, and I fully acknowledge the language is a little clunky, but if you bear with me, I'll explain why. I talk about a male role and a female role as opposed to men and women. I think that's more inclusive. I have found that a lot of times these roles are switched, that the man who's doing sort of the domestic role at home and vice versa. And of course, when you have same-sex couples, oftentimes one falls into more of a domestic role and one falls into an earning role. So that's why I'll use that language while we talk. It's interesting. My specialty is not in dating. There is a professor, I can't remember her first name, but I know her last name is Lamont, and she's written some wonderful research on sort of expectations of transitioning from dating to partnership. And when she's finding that when in dating, men and women, when they're dating the opposite sex, are still looking for these stereotypical attributes in each other. For example, women are still looking for men who will pay for dinner, who will sort of take the lead in the relationship, who maybe has a powerful job or who's tall, who has like visible attributes of strength. But when committing to a relationship and wanting to partner with someone, women are looking for equality. We really want someone who is going to do half of that cognitive labor in the household, who is going to be an equal parent if we choose to have kids. And so there is a bit of a disconnect, I think, between dating and partnering. And I think that the best thing to do there is just talk about it and acknowledge it and have open conversations. Because I think sometimes when people have the ability to do a little self-reflection, it's like, oh yeah, I am falling into these gendered patterns. And I do want to look for someone different outside of those stereotypical gender norms.
Let's talk about dating. And let's say you mentioned paying for dinner. That's like the classic kind of gender rolled thing that's going to come up, right? Out of all the things. And I, as a guy, I just know my experience, and I don't necessarily feel like it's my right or that I need to pay. But you kind of alluded to this. I feel that the woman may expect that. And that's also an assumption on my side. But I tend to look at it also through a lens of like, if I invite someone to dinner, maybe it's like, well, I'm going to pay. I extended it. But obviously there's all kinds of different scenarios. But let's say it's a date and we want to fall out of that gender norm. To me, the thing that makes most sense to me is to split it. It's like, I'll pay for mine. That makes logical sense, but that's not the expectation, I think, as you said. So what could that conversation be like? Let's say a first date, even. It makes me feel a little awkward even just thinking about it, right? Like how can we have that conversation?
As if first dates aren't awkward enough, right? To add something even more to it. So what I found in my research is that there is a big disconnect between what we value and what our behavior is. So, Pew, I think the last one was in 2020, did a survey with Americans and found that 79% of Americans say that they value gender equality. This is something that they actually think is important. That's a huge percentage of the population. And it's a very popular issue, right? Where a lot of people can come together on. When you look at the data about how people behave in the household once they are partnered, because we see that people in a female role tend to do twice as much work in the home as people in the male role, you see that there's a disconnect between what our values are and what our behavior is. So if you're in a first date and you're sitting down at a restaurant, I can see how some people would laugh at this, but I would say something to the effect of, gender equality is really important to me. And I'm always trying to find ways to live my values. And so can we talk about that? Like, what is that? What do you think that looks like in terms of, is it okay if we split, if we go every other date? What are your thoughts? I think that, a man could posit that idea, and I could totally see that girl rolling her eyes and thinking that was excuse to get out of paying. But, having that conversation, sometimes there's going to be awkward moments and misunderstandings because we live in a gendered world, and it's just going to take some time to move out of that. So I still think it's a great conversation to have. I think anyone could bring it to the table. And then it's out in the open. And then it's not this awkward thing we're dancing around. It's something that you've actually talked about and made a decision.
And I like the practical tip of, well, you weren't intending to, but like, hey, I'll get this one, you get the next one. It's also that somehow it feels equitable, but also like I'm not trying to get out of paying for dinner. And dime you. Yeah. And because, we don't have to get into it. We've talked about it on previous episodes, but people's relationship with money is a whole other thing in psychology. And obviously we're talking about gender, but that comes in too, of like, all right, just power and money and their own personal relationships, what it feels like to have someone pay for you. Maybe that feels good, or that feels like they have power over me, all this stuff. Or a guy can be emasculating because of everything there. I'm a man, I'm supposed to. Why is she offering? So lots of layers there.
You might learn a lot by having that conversation early on and kind of peel back those layers a little bit. Because you're right. I think that there's a lot of learned behavior and expectations that are behind who pays the bill. And I don't know, it could be quite awkward, let's be honest, but it could also end really well, where you think, oh, now we've got that out of the way and we can just focus on getting to know each other.
And that's a great way to get to know someone, right? Is like, you're going to learn a lot about their views, if they're like, well, the man is supposed to pay. What do you mean? It's like, maybe.
Why do you think that? Like, right. Let's talk about that. And that leads me to, something else that I like to bring up with people is that if you truly want, and I really believe that the most, the people who really need to be having this conversation are people who are just partnering. And it could be your first relationship or your 10th relationship. But when you're forming those new, fresh patterns with a new partner and someone you're newly committed to, you're already making all these changes to bring two lives together as one new life. This is the perfect time to also talk about gender roles. It's not impossible later on. but it gets harder. And so I'm really excited that we've started this conversation around dating. And a lot of what I heard when I was doing my research is that it needs to be a conversation that doesn't happen once. It needs to come up a lot. And it needs to be an intentional conversation. That if, I had several women I interviewed who said, back when he was my boyfriend, he told me he was a feminist and he told me that my work was important. And we left it at that. And then, fast forward 10 years, they've got 2 kids. She's the cognitive laborer. She's not able to move forward in her profession. She's angry. She's resentful because that one conversation wasn't enough. We need to really get down in more nitty-gritty issues. And in my book, I offer lots of questions and conversation points for people who are partnering to sort of have those deeper conversations. And as you mentioned, peel back the layers.
Let's talk about someone listening who's in a committed relationship and they weren't able to ask those questions early on. And now they're realizing they're in gender roles that they don't really feel good about. Like the example of the woman you said who's trying to advance her career, with 2 kids and a husband who expects her to do that, and handle everything. What are those conversations like? How can someone approach that?
Those are hard conversations. I'm not going to lie about that. So in an ideal world, it's the person. So if you have any listeners out there who are reflecting on their own relationship and they're like, oh, I'm the one who's doing less. That person who I'm partnered to, who I'm married with, they're doing more. And now that I hear this, I realize they're doing more because I've just assumed that that's what she should do because she's a woman, or that that's the right thing to do. Ideally, I would love that person to raise the issue, because when you start the conversation assuming that the person doing the female role is going to initiate it, it's just adding more work to her load. And it seems unfair to give her another task. So in an ideal world, I would hope that the person doing less would kind of start to realize that from the conversation that we're having culturally right now, especially post-pandemic. It's kind of out in the open. We've had much more honest conversations about household roles, but that's not always going to happen. So if you are the cognitive labor in your home, if you are the one who's doing more work, if you are feeling overburdened, underappreciated, and starting to feel resentful, I like to suggest that you start the conversation and take it out of the 2 of you and put it in sort of cultural gender norms. So to say, you're not a bad person and I'm not a bad person. And we obviously have a lot in common because we're together and we care about each other. But we were both raised in a gendered society. You were raised to have different values and expectations as a man. I was raised to have different values and expectations as a woman. And now we're falling into these stereotypical roles. And I'm frustrated. So let me share with you the things that I feel I'm limited on, right? And I had this conversation. I had this exact conversation with my partner. This was years ago. I was finishing my PhD, which is on the intersection of women's empowerment and masculinity. So it's this exact topic that I was researching. And I kind of had this breakdown moment. We were very good about being equal partners during the birth of our first child. And then at the birth of our second child, it just all fell apart and we totally reverted back into gendered roles. And I just thought, I'm not going to finish this dissertation with what I have to do at home. And I remember sitting on my kitchen floor and just weeping. And my husband, Evan, kept saying, I'm so sorry. He felt horrible. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? And that's when I got really angry. And I said, I don't want you to help. That's just it. Assigning you tasks is more work for me. I want you to be my partner. And I said, and you see how frustrated I am right now. But I said, I see you suffering too. You're suffering because you're working more and you're focused more on professional ambition. And I see you pulling away from the kids. I see those relationships strained. I see that you're spending less hours with them when they're little. I said, we're both suffering just in different ways. My suffering is a little more obvious, but I think both of us are suffering because we're falling into these gender roles. And what can we do to get both of us out of it? And then it wasn't about, I need to do more for you. It was what we both need to do to help both of us. And I think I mean, I just happened to be married to someone who was open to that conversation, and it has taken years and we're still working through it. But I think that conversation is probably more likely to get results than these are all the things you're doing wrong. These are all the things that I'm upset about. We need to change or else I'm leaving.
Before we continue on, we're going to take a short break to tell you about our sponsors. Spring is here and it is time for some spring cleaning. And yes, that does apply to your special drawer as well. If you were to open your sexy drawer, what would you find? A toy that is barely buzzing or some old lube? This spring, why not gift yourself a brand new set of sexy essentials from Like a Kitten? Like a Kitten offers subscription gift boxes, so each season you'll receive a new shipment right to your door with all the ingredients to spice up your sex life. Their spring box will bring renewal and awakening and tickle your senses with treats like strawberry nipple arousal cream, cheeky apple lube, and melting rose petals for the bath. The people at Like a Kitten are expert curators, and they select beautiful pleasure products. This spring, you'll receive a pink glass dildo, flowered glass Kegel balls, and even a mini flower pot with seeds for daisies, sunflowers, and roses. I love how Like a Kitten boxes think through everything. Obviously, great and fun toys and lubes, but they also go the extra mile and know how to set the mood with candles, bath goodies, and massage oils too. This spring subscription box is priced at $79, which is a great deal since the products in this box retail for well over $150. And something really sweet about Like a Kitten is that a portion of the sales goes to charities to empower women and support their education and health. To celebrate spring, Like a Kitten is offering our listeners 15% off and free shipping when you go to likeakitten.com/IDO or enter the code IDO at checkout. Just go to likeakitten.com/IDO or use the code IDO to get 15% off these incredible boxes. Likeakitten.com/IDO. The link is in the episode description. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Life can be overwhelming, and many people are burned out without even knowing it. Symptoms can include lack of motivation, feeling helpless or trapped, detachment, fatigue, and more. We've all been there, even me. When I found myself burned out in the past, it has always come after I've been doing way too much without taking care of myself. And I can vouch that burnout is a pretty awful feeling. You become totally overcome by fatigue, brain fog, and it takes extra effort to keep yourself motivated. We mostly associate burnout with work, but that's not the case. Any of our roles in life can lead us to feeling burned out, and BetterHelp Online Therapy wants to remind you to prioritize yourself. When we're up against a world that is telling us to go, go, go all the time, burnout is unfortunately all too common. However, it doesn't have to be. Thankfully, there are amazing resources out there like BetterHelp Services. Talking with somebody can help you figure out what's causing stress in your life, as well as to provide you the tools to avoid getting burned out. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/IDO. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/IDO.
I just recorded a podcast yesterday on communication, and it's obviously so key, but what you kept saying was interesting. In an ideal world, it's the partner doing less, and obviously you recognize, and unfortunately, most of the time, well, I don't want to say most of the time, but I feel like things are usually less than ideal, and that resentment might be building, and someone listening to this is like, yeah, ideally my partner would bring this conversation up, and they're not. I'm becoming resentful, and that's where the episode on any of our episodes on communication, but yesterday we talked about identifying our emotions and communicating our needs, as you said. And so instead of letting that resentment build to a boiling point and then there's a huge fight, or it starts to just degrade the relationship, it's like, hey, I feel like I'm carrying the load, and I feel I've been waiting for you to say something, and I want to have a conversation around that, and I feel tired, and I want to connect with you, and can we talk about this, and instead of, ideally, someone does bring it up.
Throw it out there. You never
Yes.
know. You might have a few listeners who are going to respond, and it has to start somewhere.
Yes.
But I agree with you that the more typical, I think, conversation is going to come from the person who is feeling the burden on their shoulders.
For sure. And, it's so interesting, this PhD that you're working on. There's obviously, as you know, so much there in gender, and as you said, in the intersection of gender and masculinity. And as a guy, it's been really interesting having conversations with my female friends these last months, and it's really tricky. It's interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And we can go back into roles, but this is roles. Like how can we have conversations with women, with our female partners about this? And I find I'm interested in it. I'm interested in women's equality, and I want that. But I feel sometimes just the fact that I am a male, everything, it kind of can get colored like, well, you don't get it. Like, as much as you try to get it, you don't, because you're not experiencing that. So I've tried to really listen and be objective. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're doing the right things. And I don't think it is, I think being an ally, I'm white, and I like to think of myself as an ally to people of color, and I work on being anti-racist. And I understand that being white, there's so many racist things that I don't see, right? And so you have to intentionally work on seeing, and know that you're going to make mistakes, and know that you're going to miss things, and you just keep working at it because it's the right thing to do. I think it's the same thing in gender. Men are raised to not see issues that women deal with day in and day out. And I think that it's just about a practice of intentionality, of listening and trying to see. And when you don't understand something, ask, and be prepared that it might be uncomfortable or confusing or go poorly once in a while. But I think that's the only true way to be an ally.
Related to this, one of the things that I've had conversations around with multiple female friends these last months is just the difficulty in moving through the world as a single woman, in relation to, just for lack of a better description, like just creepy guys and unwarranted looks and comments and touch. And it's very frustrating for me to hear those things. I hate that. And I hated hearing that, before I had a daughter, and now I have a 6-year-old daughter. I don't need that as a reason to not like it, but it's just another layer of like, man, come on, guys, like, get your shit together. And so I started thinking and having the conversations with the women about that and how that can change. And to me, and I'd like to hear your opinion, but to me, it was like, we got to educate men, but particularly young men and the next generation, and that are then going to have sons, because it's like this thing where I have a mechanic here who, he's super old school. I live in Costa Rica. There's the whole machismo culture, and I don't know him well, but I know that he's probably a bit misogynistic in the sense of like that whole machismo culture. And he tells me he has 6 sons. The other day I found out, and I immediately was like, oh God, now there's 6 more of you because you're modeling this. And so to me, it starts with what is being taught to these young men. So anyways, as a man and as a woman, from your perspective, like, what could I do to, besides listening to these women and their stories and talking to my friends and saying like, hey, no, it's not okay to ask a girl out 6 times when she told you no the first time. Like, leave her alone. That was something my female friend had told me. This guy kept asking her out, and that it seems minor, but that's not minor. It's like, leave her alone. Yeah.
Right. She said no.
So I'm going on and on, but yeah, what are your thoughts?
I mean, this is like fantastic that you're thinking all these things. I think that, so first of all, what can you do? I think that we all need to push back when given the opportunity in the various spaces that we're in. So those female friends of yours are rarely going to be in a group of all men. It doesn't happen socially very often, right? They're probably never going to be in a men's locker room. There's just places they're unlikely to be, simply because you're following social patterns of being a woman. So when you hear that, if you hear, if you're out for, dinner with male friends, or if you're with colleagues, and there's a panel being put together and it's 4 men on a panel, be the one to say, this doesn't feel right. There's plenty of female experts in this space. Why don't we bring in some women here so this is more balanced? Or if you hear a guy make a joke that's inappropriate, be the one that says, that's not funny anymore. That just sounds like a Me Too incident. It's 2022. Could we think about that? And in my book, the bulk of my book comes from the fact that I identified 40 men. I call them the EP 40, Equal Partners 40 men who are living as equal partners. 30 are fathers and 10 don't have kids, but all 40 are partnered. And they all do half the physical and cognitive labor in their household. And I interviewed these men, I got to know them, and I sort of wove their stories together to figure out where they came from. They don't represent our current population in any way, shape, or form. It's aspirational masculinity. It's like where we want to be in 10 years. And a lot of them told me about how they had to push back against friends. One guy told me, had a great story. He was out with it was like a Thursday night group, his high school friends. He'd been doing it for like 10 years since high school graduation. It was just something everyone did. You meet out, you go have beers. But he said it was getting raunchier and raunchier. The conversation made him uncomfortable. And there was one Thursday where one of his friends made some really crude comments to the waitress, the server. Sorry, I shouldn't use that word. And she left, and he said, guys, that's not cool. Like, why would you say that? I think you made her uncomfortable. So when the server came back, the guy said, hey, my friend's lame-o and thinks that you are uncomfortable. You're not uncomfortable, are you? So he even re-traumatized the situation, right? And he said that day, I stopped going to that Thursday night group. I tried. I didn't have an ally at that table. No one else agreed with me. I realized these guys were totally different than me. I have since made new friends. I hang out with different people on Thursday night. I had to remove myself from the situation. So what you can do when you're in a situation where you hear it, push back. And if it's a chronic situation where you don't think you're going to make any headway, remove yourself from it. And I think that's also a really strong statement. Like, I'm not comfortable being part of this. And we can get into the raising boys issue, because I think that's a huge part of this.
I've been pitched quite a few products claiming they're going to blow my mind, and I'm always a bit skeptical. I'm also never the one to give into hype, but this time my mind has officially been blown by Foria, and I'm excited to share it with you all. Imagine your best orgasm. Now imagine that it could be even better. With Foria, it's beyond possible. Foria makes award-winning sex and intimacy products made with all-natural and plant-based ingredients and CBD, designed to increase pleasure and relieve any discomfort, whether you're solo or with a partner. Foria will transform your sex life. Their products are made to help women and people with vulvas fully experience their sexual pleasure. Think intensely heightened orgasms. My favorite product is Foria's bestseller Awaken Arousal Oil. It is the ultimate pleasure pregame. Using CBD and warming sensation-inducing organic botanicals that enhance arousal, sensitivity, pleasure, and access to orgasms, the oil is like a juicy warm-up that makes me feel incredibly relaxed, open, and honestly, just turned on. Foria has a serious cult following, and for good reason, with tens of thousands of people who have had their sex lives transformed through using their products. So yes, you have my permission to try this. I fully endorse you to go ahead and treat yourself to more deeper, fuller pleasure wherever you can find it as often as possible, and you can start with a bottle of Foria. Foria is offering a special deal for our listeners. Get 20% off your first order by visiting foriawellness.com/IDO or use the code IDO at checkout. That's Foria, FORIN wellness.com/IDO for 20% off your first order. I recommend trying their Awaken Arousal and Sex Oil. You'll thank me later. Take action today for a healthier tomorrow with Everlywell. Their at-home lab test, vitamins, and supplements can help you get the knowledge and support you need so you can become a healthier you. Everlywell is a digital healthcare designed for you at an affordable and transparent price. With over 30 at-home lab tests, you can choose the test to help you get the answers that you need, like the women's health test or the food sensitivity test. They make it so easy. So let me tell you how it works. Everlywell ships products straight to your door with everything you need in one package. To take your at-home lab test, simply collect your sample and use the included prepaid shipping label to mail your test back to a certified lab. Your physician-reviewed results will be sent to your phone or device in just days. And you can share your results with your primary care physician to help guide your next steps. And if you ordered vitamins and supplements, you can start adding them to your daily routine right away. I was super impressed with my whole experience with Everlywell. I sometimes don't feel great after eating certain foods, so I opted for the food sensitivity test. I did the test yesterday, so I haven't received my results yet, but I wanted to tell you how pleasantly surprised I was at the whole process and how convenient it was. I could do it on my own time, which was super great if you're busy like me, and it only took 15 minutes from the time I opened the box until I finished the test. It's so simple. Over 1 million people have trusted Everlywell to support their health and wellness goals, and you should too. And for our listeners of the show, Everlywell is offering a special discount of 20% off an at-home lab test at everlywell.com/IDO. That's everlywell.com/IDO for 20% off your next at-home lab test. everlywell.com/IDO.
Thank you for that. And yeah, that example you give is like the current, present things that can be done. But for the future, and that can have an impact. And I believe people can change, but I think it's really hard to take a 45-year-old man who had a dad who was misogynistic, who has had friends who have made comments, and then have him come to some revelation that everything he's doing is wrong. It's certainly not a lost cause, but I think the real change is how we parent the young boys and continue to change the culture. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
I totally agree with you. And we have data to show the same thing, that it's just people who are set in their ways, or it's harder for them to change. And so I do think focusing on younger generations is a great approach. So I do love talking to Gen Z, and I love talking to younger kids. They just had birthdays. 8 and 11 are how old my kids are. I have an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And we talk about gender pointedly and consistently in our household. But I don't think that your colleague or your neighbor with the 6 boys, they're not a lost cause either. What I did learn in interviewing my EP 40 for the book, a lot of those men actually came from very misogynist households. Several of them came from violent households. A quarter of them came from single mother households. there was I think only one or two of all 40 actually came from a household that role modeled the behavior that they are perpetuating. So 38 of them made a huge change. And when you asked, when I was digging into sort of what was their inspiration and when did that change happen, it came from all different places. It came, it was like the uncle that they got to see for a week every summer. And they realized like what a great relationship his uncle had with his aunt. And he loved the way that his uncle treated him with respect. And so he just decided in his mind, like, I want to be more like my uncle than my dad. I had one man talk about a camp counselor who was only part of his life for one summer, had a huge impact. Sometimes it was neighbors or a mom's boyfriend that was around for a few years, had a huge impact. So what that tells me is that we all have the opportunity to have impact on boys and kids. And you never really know who's watching and who's going to take that to heart. So just role modeling, love and authenticity and allowing boys to be who they are, encouraging them to follow all different parts of themselves and not to dismiss things as being too girly or too feminine, and really encouraging boys to have a broad range of friends and activities. Whether you're a parent of a boy yourself, or you're a grandparent, or you're an aunt or an uncle or a friend, I think all of us have more power than we realize in influencing the next generation.
I love that. Is very hopeful. The story of the 38, that they didn't come from perfect models in their household. So they're not lost causes there. And yeah, you never know. Having a 6-year-old daughter, definitely try to insert, positive gender ideas with her. I shouldn't say it like that, not insert anything, but have her more open, because I think kids they're open, like they're blank slate and they don't have all these cultural things. So I actually want to backtrack, trying not to insert those things and let her move through the world how she feels most comfortable, in a sense. But what are some things that I could talk to her about preemptively before maybe she experiences it?
Unfortunately, I think she's probably experienced more than we realize because, kids are sponges for messaging from advertisements and TV and cartoons and conversations. So by 6, you've just been able to hear a lot of different opinions already, and you're already starting to absorb those social norms. What I try to do is counter what society is going to teach. So society is always going to teach girls to be kind, to be more complacent, to be thoughtful, to be good friends, to talk things out. So, encouraging girls to be rambunctious and dirty and active and to help her find that other side of her. And then I honestly believe that culturally, the last 10, 20 years, we've done a great job in changing how we raise girls. I think the books that are available for young girls are different than they were 20 years ago. I think that schools have changed and teaching has changed. And we're seeing a real genesis in sort of this way that we treat girls and young women. But I don't see a big change in the way we're raising boys. And so we raise these women to be strong and independent, and you can do anything. And then if they happen to be attracted to men and they partner with a man in their 20s or 30s, all of a sudden they're sorely disappointed because they're like, wait, this person expects me to, he's okay with me having a career as long as I'm still cooking dinner every night and doing the laundry and keeping the house tidy. And that's not how I was raised. So I think what we need to do is really work with boys to be comfortable with strong women, to be comfortable with women in leadership roles, to be okay with their own vulnerability, and to have a very wide definition of masculinity. Yes, masculinity could be the star football player, and masculinity could also be someone who's really in touch with their own feelings. So as your daughter grows up and she has male friends or, bringing home, I just think that's something else we can do is just nurture friendships. I think that, I just heard this recently. I'm trying to remember where it was, but it was a friend, and it was a gathering on like a Friday night, and there was a high school boy who was there who came with a female friend. And some of the older guys were teasing him, like, oh, who's your girlfriend? Why does it always have to be about sex? Let's encourage our kids to have relationships of all kinds with all different people, with all different genders. And it doesn't always have to be sexual or romantic or physical. In fact, one of my findings from the EP40 is that having close female friends growing up really helped them be allies and helped them see gender issues that a lot of other guys didn't see. So that's another thing, just be encouraging of non-romantic friendships and let kids sort of figure it out themselves, as you mentioned.
I love that. And I could talk for hours on this because there's so many different angles. As you know, you're doing a doctorate in it, but I think it's super important, and we've laid a great foundation for our listeners to think about these things as it comes to their personal lives and their relationships. So before we wrap up, are there any things that you want to emphasize, or maybe something we didn't go over as it relates to gender? And then we'll say goodbye.
I would just close again with this idea that gender equality in the home, I think it needs to leave the nuclear family. I think for a long time, we focused this conversation on small households. And this is a much bigger problem than any one of us individually. This is an intergenerational problem. And it's going to take all of us to fight our way out of it. So whether you are single or partnered, kids or no kids, maybe you're a grandparent or a friend or an aunt or an uncle, I think there's a role for everyone. And so I would hope that whoever your listener is, if you're interested in gender equality, if you're interested in living gender equality, no one gets a pass. We all have work to do.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kate. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you online, a little bit about your book, and then we'll say goodbye?
Thank you. So I'm active on Twitter at Mangino Kate. My website, katemangino.com, has all of my book launch events if you're interested in hearing more. And the book is for sale on June 28th. I don't know when this is going to post, but it will be in your favorite store or bookstore or your online ordering. It's Audible, download electronic version, so you can get it from your favorite bookseller.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll have the links in our show notes and on our website, idopodcast.com. And yes, I believe if you're listening to this, it will be out in about a week. And depending on if you listen to it the day it comes out or in 3 years, go get it. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Kate.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. As always, all the links to the guest, as well as any of their recommendations, will be in the show notes page. You can find the link to that in the episode description or by going to idopodcast.com. Click on the podcast tab up at the top and you will have access to all the episodes that we've ever done. There are over 300 of them. And while you're on our website, if you haven't checked out our free 14-day Happy Couple Challenge, we really hope you do. It's a free email challenge that we send to you. It's 14 days of fun, easy, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And if you're looking for something that provides a little more help with working on your relationship, whether it's improving intimacy or communication with your partner, or just bringing the spark back, we would love for you guys to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. We're offering $100 off to all of our listeners if you go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. We've worked with over 15 psychologists and therapists to create the real life tools and strategies that they are teaching their clients. So we wanted to give them to you. It's a self-paced online course that can be done in as little as a month or up to 3 months. You can really decide how much or how little you want to do with your partner, or maybe just yourself. So we hope you guys check that out. It's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Have a great day.